if you're listening to this, I really like the fact that when we do these top fives, that maybe OG and I take the instructions a little differently. So our lists are a little different. Of 8 on your top 5. Right. I like that because we get a little different direction. And OG, I looked at it as these Achilles heels that we really need to consider more often, like the things that come at us that we're like, oh, wow. Should have seen that coming. What about you? Is this going to be a little quirky for you?
I didn't understand the assignment also. So, we'll see. We'll see what we come up with.
All right. Well, let's do this. Our top 5 risks that we maybe don't pay attention to enough.
Number 5.
So I'm going to do an easy one. This is in no particular order, even though it's a top 5. It's not like literally 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for me. I just have these in just kind of a random order here. I think that most people are concerned, when thinking about financial planning, they think about the risk of dying. And thinking about like, well, I got a mortgage to pay, I got kids to send to college, that sort of thing. I don't think too many people think about living too long. And that also is an interesting risk because, when you have that time frame that's on that one side, it's like we talk about how you can retire better, more money if you retire at 65 instead of 60, right? But what if you offset that by planning on dying at 90 and you live to 103? Yeah. So living too long is the risk I think a lot of people forget about.
Boy, that's a great one. And that did not make my list, but I know this is a big challenge that CFPs are addressing right now, right? With longevity annuities and with these asset allocation plans. I think that's part of the reason why you and I dislike target date funds so much, OG, is because of that longevity risk.
Yeah, 100%. Also bonds suck.
What we mean by that is that you're slowing down your chance of doubling the money in your portfolio well before you're going to spend the money, because the target date fund is made to hit the target, maybe go just a little bit beyond the target, meaning that you're going to slow down the risk, which also means slowing down the chance of a high enough return to sustain you for a long life.
Yep.
My number 5, I'm just going to pay homage to, because while we all know these two things are going to happen, OG, I think, like we talked about in today's headline, we think they're always going to happen way out in the future. And that is, I don't think that I'm going to die or I'm going to get a disease, that happens to other people, or it's going to happen a long time from now. And the frustration that I have with this is that I have a great friend who's a nurse practitioner. She's run with our group of runners for a long time, super healthy, just got a brain tumor, OG, like out of the blue, way too busy to have a brain tumor, too much stuff going on. And it looks like things are okay. Everybody here in Texarkana that knows her is pulling for her. She's just an amazing woman, but 47, 48 years old, out of the blue, something that happens to other people happens way later. And I think we got to be more cognizant that that could happen to me. And what am I going to do? I mean, nurse practitioner, she makes a nice sum of money that supports her family. Mm-hmm. This tumor may have lasting effects that may mean that she needs long-term disability coverage, or she at least needs a plan, right? That's longer than 2 or 3 months. We'll see how it goes. But that's my number 5.
Number 4.
My number 4 is that the people around me are going to be respectful of my property, meaning that I take care of my stuff, right? And this could even involve stealing, but between stealing and I've had my house broken into, had all my stuff stolen. That is something I had never thought would happen to me. But also just the fact that somebody uses something of mine, comes over to my house, uses something of mine, and just breaks shit. I often think that I'm careful with my things, but I don't think we think enough about the people around me and the fact that, mistakes happen and some people aren't that careful.
Note to self, keep hands in my pocket at Joe's house. Lest the Troika dolls, smashing across the concrete.
And what does that mean for our protection plan? Number 1, it means the emergency fund, right? But number 2 is, I think all we look at, OG, on our homeowners, I think all we look at is the cost. we don't look at like what happens if, somebody accidentally drives my riding lawnmower into the lake. Hasn't happened. But what if that happens? Like that could be a significant amount of money.
Or your car through your living room. Has happened.
Could happen.
Yeah. So my number 4, I'm going to go with, you mentioned house stuff. And this happened to us here recently while I was on a trip. Happened more frequently actually than I desire. I'm going to say emergency house maintenance. You were talking about maybe home insurance claims and that sort of thing. Maybe not. But I'm also thinking about, you're not going to home insurance claim your water heater going out. But when is your water heater going to go out? I'll tell you when. Christmas Eve. Right before everyone shows up at your house. Or does everyone know how to shut the water off in their house? I don't think everybody does. Like, so if something's leaking and spraying water out of your kitchen, spraying everywhere. How do you get that stopped immediately? So then, there's not that secondary damage. We live in Dallas. We've had 2 years of record breaking cold temperatures for extended periods of time, which has caused all sorts of other issues in people's homes. So how to shut off the water, how to, do you have a system in place for like checking on your things? What happens if your dishwasher breaks or your refrigerator? It's like these things that we don't really anticipate and certainly don't plan for and put into our budget. I've found that a rule of thumb is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1% of your house value is what you're going to write a check for every year, just for the crap that goes on around your house. And some of it may be upgrades. Some of it may be things that I need to fix. Some of it may be things that are, kind of deferred maintenance.
I'm thinking about your grill, just the thing that happened to your grill.
Which time?
Right.
When it melted, the wires, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. It was just on and melted. Yeah. Well, that was a who happened to my grill more than a what happened to my grill.
Maybe that goes back to mine, right?
But take care of your shit. Yeah.
How do you guys feel about, in this vein, how do you feel about, like a home warranty that you can buy for all of this smaller stuff versus just socking away money to prepare for the inevitable relatives that break your grill?
Yeah, I don't think... We haven't had any reasonable success with that. It kind of comes included with a lot of home purchases. It's a selling feature that realtors use and mortgage companies use to get your business. But I don't particularly think that has worked out well for us because we had it for a period of time. And I remember we had a microwave issue and they're like, well, they don't make that part anymore. And we said, okay, so now what happens? And they said, well, we're going to give you the cash value, which this microwave is, 8 years old. So here's $87.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, okay, I just kind of, it's slimy.
It's not replacement value insurance. I've actually had a better experience, OG. And once again, I didn't buy the insurance, Doug. It was attached to the house that I bought.
Yeah.
But we had 2 claims, one on a washing machine, one on a refrigerator, and we did get new ones. But I think that's replacement value coverage versus, today's value
cash
coverage
value.
and replacement value is going to be more expensive. And the person selling the house is not going to want to buy. It's not going to want to buy the replacement value coverage.
Yeah.
But I think, OG, I think to answer Doug's question, I think it's more important for that insurance if you don't have an emergency fund, which is why you build the emergency fund as fast as you can. The cool thing about the emergency fund, you can begin jettisoning insurance, easy for me to say, when you get that emergency fund in place.
Number 3.
I'm going to take number 3 here right out the gate. And I got so many on here. I'm trying to piece them together. I'll save one here. I'm going to say parental assistance, or just more broader based family assistance. If you have any sort of like family relationships in your life, parents or siblings, and you're doing okay financially, there will come a time when someone will say, we're a little tight. We're a little tight, like Cousin Eddie sitting on the couch asking Frank for $23,000. Sure, Eddie, how much do you need? And he pulls out a couple 50s and he's like, $23,000. And having a plan for either A, being able to fulfill those needs, or B, knowing how to handle that in terms of the conversation, how you want to discuss that, how the protocol is for you and the other people that are making your money decisions, maybe your spouse or whatever, to be able to have a process for discussing that, rather than that awkwardness of going like, you just don't know, right? I was reading
You're on the spot,
reading a Reddit thread the other day about this couple who had some family members who were not very financially responsible, and the husband wanted to take care of mom and the sister, and the mom and sister had lived in this house, rented a home for a long time, but the owner was selling it. And so the new owner came in and said, well, I would love to keep you guys. Rent's going up fourfold, 400%. This guy wasn't charging enough. So they're all freaking out. So husband wants to help. Wife says, no, we can't do it. Husband does it anyway. Buys mom and sister a house, puts it on his name. They get to live there. He's not on the title. He's on the mortgage. Like all these like bad decisions, one right after another. And of course doesn't tell his spouse until it comes up. And it goes, oh, by the way, that house that I bought, I bought for my mom. It's like, we talked like having a process for having that discussion and thinking about it in advance will help. One of the questions we ask from a planning standpoint with our, kind of Gen X clients is what's going on with mom and dad? Like, are you going to be asked to contribute to their financial needs at some point in time in your life? And if you're the successful one in your family, the answer is yes, you will. Unless they also are, beyond successful too. But back to our, nobody's planning on living very long, it just kind of runs out, So anyway, family assistance, the conversations, the planning for all of that, like trying to have a thought process around that. I think most people skip, and then they get bombarded at the family grill and they're reaching in their pocket for $50 bills and cousin Eddie's asking for money.
I saw people handle this two different ways. Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. I saw him talk about this. People ask him for money, relatives ask him for money. He says, I'm going to give you more than what you asked for. Of course, he has means, so he can afford to do that. I'm going to give you more. This is going to be a gift. And you and I are going to have a contract that says you are never, ever going to talk to me about money again, period. We are not going to have this ruin Thanksgiving. We're not going to have this ruin the holidays. This is it. One time and you're done. So
what was his number again? Do you remember? I haven't used my chit up yet with Mr. Wonderful. I would like to ask him for $100 million.
And there's another way I heard of, which I think I like even better, which is this man of means has plenty of money. His family doesn't know, and he doesn't want them to ask. So every year he asks them for money so that they're sure he's broke and nobody's ever going to ask him for money. So he does it systematically to make sure the question never comes up. Nobody's coming near my money. I'm not having those awkward conversations. I'm okay with everybody thinking that I got nothing. My number 3 is, as we record this, there's, natural disasters going on in the US and around the world. A natural disaster is not going to hit me, right? Or even less, because people go, okay, yeah, tornadoes, maybe, but probably not. Lightning strike, probably not. But, I've had animals in my house, right? That have surprised the hell out of me.
Rawr.
Right? We had this weird noise in our ventilation system, and I looked down in the register, and there's an animal looking right up at me. And boy, those repairs, finding out where it was, and then that repair ended up costing me a ton of money. And of course, I also figured out why my heating bills were so high, because there was a way for them to get in. We also had, squirrels in our attic. So natural disasters, animals won't interfere with my stuff. What are you going to do if that happens? That's my number 3.
Number 2.
Number 2, I think is the big one. When we would talk about disability coverages and people would tell me I'm a safe skier, or they tell me I'm a really good driver. And so we don't need to talk about disability and the fact that might happen. My number 2 is I won't do something clumsy. Like there have been times that and when you do the clumsy thing It is the wildest thing. I was on a 15-mile run with friends of mine. I went around a corner. I'm talking to somebody next to me, so I'm not paying attention. I ran into a concrete flower box, and I ran into it so hard that there was a police station next door. A cop took me 5 miles back to my house because I could barely walk, and I had trouble the next 2 days. But you can make that Joe being Joe, but stuff just happens. My mom fell down the stairs when she was in her early 30s and broke her back.
One of our planners was doing a TikTok video, and she won't mind me telling this because it's viral on TikTok, was doing a TikTok dance and did it on a curb and kind of offset on the curb a little bit and broke her foot.
Ouch.
Just by doing the TikTok.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Jacqueline.
Yeah, be ready for the clumsy. Let's have a real disability discussion.
All right, my number 2 is natural disaster. No, I went a different direction with this. I literally wrote EMP, nuclear war, off the grid. And yeah, really.
Welcome to the former Marine here, by the way. I guess Marine's always a Marine, but still.
And here's what I mean by that. You were talking about natural disaster in terms of tornadoes and, that lightning hitting your house and that sort of thing. But I'm thinking about it in the context of what do you do if it's like Houston during Hurricane Harvey and there's no power for 4 weeks, right? And thinking,
what about the big Texas freeze?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't 4 weeks, thankfully, but yeah, I mean, any of those things. When I was a kid, we always had fire safety month, and the fire department would come to the school and talk about, make sure you have a plan. And, if something happens, and we had a fire in our house when I was a kid. So that kind of hit home. And I was thinking about, we don't really do that a lot anymore, or at least maybe my kids do, and I'm not aware of it. But taking that a step further and going, well, what happens if you don't have access to the internet for the next week, month, couple of weeks? What happens if you don't have access to a shower or your clothes, or what are you going to do so that you can keep living if you're one of these displaced people for whatever reason, a flood, tornado, wildfire, hurricane, civil event, because any of these things have happened in the last couple of years. You can see them. And it's stuff like, making sure that you have some cash at home, right? Making sure that you have an idea of where are we going to go so that I can get my family to safety, so that then we can kind of decompress and go, okay, now how are we going to fix this problem, right? If your house washes away in a hurricane, you can't be sitting on the boat next to it trying to formulate how I'm going to rebuild it, right? You have to go somewhere, and having that thought around, where you're going to go or what you're going to do, or at least, again, thinking about the scenario in advance enough that it gives you the chance to think reasonably about it, as opposed to the boat's here, it's time to go. What are we doing? It's just, I don't think a lot of people think about those risks because it doesn't happen to me.
Well, that means it's that time, OG.
Number 1.
This kind of feels like a cop out, but I think it's okay. I think that most people don't think of real time market risks. And I don't necessarily mean market risks in terms of market fluctuation, like the stock market, although that's part of it, but all of the ancillary things that go with market fluctuation and market risk. Like, for example, the impact in the last year and a half of rising rates to fixed income portfolios. Like, what is the relationship of that? And how is that, how does that work in as it relates to my portfolio? I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day that is a little Pollyanna. It's the 60-40 portfolio is broken. It will never work again. It's like, okay, settle down. It could be that we're at the beginning of a time where it doesn't work great for a while. Like, what's your plan if you can't use 100 years worth of market data for the next 10, or what's your plan if, we don't get the 80s to 2000 over the next 20 years, and it's more like 65 to 80 over the next, 15 years. It doesn't mean that the economy is broken, or it doesn't mean that you're not going to reach your goals, but they're going to change, right? And I think a lot of times from a planning standpoint, it's really easy to just sit down with a spreadsheet and go, yeah, I'm going to put this money in. I'm going to grow it at 4%, or I'm going to grow it at 8% a year. I'm going to live on the 4% rule, and all that sort of stuff. And it's like all those rules of thumb work over 100 years of data. They may not work over the next 10. And I think it's really important to do some scenario planning, especially around financial independence, around what if we just happen to be unlucky? What happens if you're the guy that retires January 1 of 2008 with the proverbial 100% stock portfolio, right? Like you should be, I think. And then you wake up on January 1st of 2009 and you're down 47%. Just unlucky. You thought, I can withstand 10%. I can withstand 20. You wake up and you're down 50. And by the way, it's not over. Thinking about those, extraordinary tail, what's that called? Long tail risks, like those once in a million chances, the black swan events that happen every single other week. It seems like, I don't think we spend a lot of time from a planning standpoint dissecting those things. That doesn't mean you should focus on it and be like, well, I'll never retire because, all these scenarios are bad. But having a plan on the shelf and thinking about it in advance gives you the opportunity to be a little more calm. God forbid something off the rails happens. So
that should have been my number one.
Yes, it
as
should
well,
have.
because it totally should have, because I think that when I think through that risk, I think that creates a cavalcade of other problems, right? Like the second that happens, well, what do you have to do? You got to double down and quote, make the money back. Right. And then you end up taking some unnecessary risks. And then if, even if your muffler's dragging behind the car later, you don't want to take money out of your portfolio. Yeah. Like it completely changes your life.
Everything.
It changes everything. And don't get me wrong. It's not that disability doesn't change your life. It certainly does. But man, that's a good one. My last one is another one on the disability train, because my number 2 was, I won't do something clumsy. Number 1 was, I talked about, earlier, further up, homeowners insurance is fine. And people being good to my stuff, or me being good to my stuff, is fine. But other people being careful when they're out and about and doing stuff to me. Like we've all seen the video, OG, of the driver that falls asleep and goes into the other lane. And I'm not the driver that fell asleep. I'm the driver in the other lane. Or somebody, the truck, right, where the wheel comes off. And then the truck, I remember driving down I-94 one time, and this fifth wheel just gets going back and forth and back and forth. And before I know it, quarter mile up the road, we're going down this big long hill on our way towards Chicago. And the thing starts flipping sideways, the truck and the trailer flipping sideways, going down three lanes of traffic. And if you're anywhere near that, that stuff happens fairly regularly.
So you're saying you're not the schlemiel, you're the schlemazel.
Thank you. Doug makes it succinct. Thank you, Mr. Dre. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes. You're on the bad end of somebody else's stuff. And I think even if we are a safe skier or a good driver, we don't consider that it isn't always about us, OG, that somebody else can make bad stuff happen in our life.
Yep.
Those are great. Certainly not exhaustive. We'd love to hear yours, and we will do those at a back porch segment, a community segment that we have at the end of every episode if you send us yours. What did we miss? What do you think needs to be on this list? And how do you think about our top 5 list? Head to either our basement Facebook group or write me, joe@stackingbenjamins.com. And we'd love to talk about it more on a future episode. And I'm sure we will definitely be talking about these more as we go, because risk management, huge part of planning. And OG, insurance companies want you to talk about buying insurance. I think well before you buy insurance, we need to think about what my risk is, right? And then how do I approach it? And insurance is just one way of potentially many.